Right, just wait for a couple more to come on. I appreciate I'm a little bit late to start, so apologies. But plenty to get into. So, a few more turning up. Hi, happy Tuesday afternoon, 16th of January. Plenty out already today. A few shocks, a few bits of news coming out around this morning. If we look at the indices in Hong Kong, we had a little bit of stimulus come in China earlier. This was, I think, 139 billion. I did retweet this morning. It came through, I think, around 8:30 or so this morning. Yeah, 8:20. That'll be this. A little bit of a boost to stocks in the immediate term, but really didn't get a march on in Hong Kong afterwards. We're still pretty stagnant. So the market not really digesting that as hugely bullish, you would say. So very much as we were with the Hong Kong's stock market, the Hang Seng. What else do we have? We had Goldman earnings out. So not JP Morgan from last week, but if you look at Goldman Sachs, we had their earnings out this morning at around, well, it's supposed to be out at 12:30. These guys tend to do, shocked us a little bit with when it came through. That was around 12:25 when this volatility kicked up. You'll see with the 1 minute charts actually when the madness began around 12:25. So yeah, that's 2 out of the 3 we've had now that have come out earlier than expected. So just be conscious if you are using the earnings calendar that these are estimations these times. These are not gospel. That we get consistency more so with the data releases that you get out of the economic calendars on here. But when it comes to the earnings, they can just do what the hell they want. There's no real time with this. So you've just got to be on your toes and available maybe 15 minutes beforehand and just wait for it to happen. Having a squawk, live news, some way of knowing for sure that the news has come through is very, very much advised, because these charts can move around a little bit in the, even at 12:16, you might have thought that was the news out. But really it was the action at 12:25 that really got things motoring around. So yeah, just be vigilant of that, waiting to see the news is truly through before putting your data or trades on. The move actually out of the Dow hasn't been, out of Goldman hasn't been great, right? We're back to where we started the day, so any moves up have been unwound. We look at that in relation to the Dow, because the Dow is the company or the index in which Goldman represents about 6.8%. It's the second biggest company on that index here at 12:25. That big push higher, but it has unwound somewhat. It's amazing how it does react around these high volume levels, right? Even though it's fundamental news, these high volume areas are still areas of interest for these markets. And yeah, we've given it up and we're actually lower than where we were at 12:25. Or in fact, right now we're back to where we were at 12:25. So that was interesting data for sure. But perhaps the most interesting thing of the day altogether is this, the Empire State Manufacturing Index. Absolutely in tatters today. I can have a look on a chart of this to show you what it should look like. But if you kind of look back over history, we haven't seen, even in the great financial crisis, we never saw a manufacturing index as low as we've seen today. Only COVID, full global shutdowns in my trading career, probably, certainly since 2006. Yes, and so the whole time I've been trading, we've never seen anything other than in a pandemic this low. So I think what's going to be interesting the next little while is how the central bankers talk about the recent data that's come through. There is no doubt that this is a massive canary in the coal mine for potential rate cuts. And I know the market has, at the end of the year, was pricing in potential rate cuts in 2024. Maybe this sort of data is the sort of thing that will get you 7 rate cuts, because it looks like they need some help. That is for sure. It is abysmal data coming out from the US today. As you'd expect, this was a bit of a shock to the market. It's not normally the biggest piece of data, I have to say, but I managed to catch a little bit on this, given how out of whack it was. But if you look at things like gold, for example, when I do like trading on these figures, it was up, in those first 5 minutes after the data. We're up a good $7 to the highest 13. And it's still looking fairly well coiled to move higher. Who knows? Maybe to the point of control around 20.51 on the futures might be in line. The monthly point of control worth a potential look at that level for sure. Very interesting. Stocks moved nicely on that too. At the time, we had a bit of a pump up, bad news being good news, but that has unraveled. I'm interested to see how stocks react around this. Bad news being good news. It does persist for some time, but it's not necessarily going to be there forever, right? I'd rather trade the dollar, bonds, or gold on this news for the time being, while we get a clear view on whether the S&P wants to rally on good news or sell off on it. Looking at the dollar, you look at cable, for example, that had a nice spike. It's at 130 on that, although gave it back briefly. It's now starting to push higher again. Really unusual data coming through for the manufacturing index. To me, next week is going to be very interesting now. Next Wednesday is PMIs. These are the manufacturing PMIs. Very curious to see what the manufacturing numbers in the PMI suggest. Are they as dismal as the Empire State one? It's a smaller area, the Empire State survey. So, if this confirms how dreadful the manufacturing sector is in the US, then maybe we are going to get these rate cuts. And whether that means we should be going higher on, I'll pop this back up here so you can see what I'm looking at. So whether that suggests we should be higher on Wednesday next week remains to be seen. Back to the stock market. So let me drag this up here, and we can take a look at the US markets before the open. Getting a little bit of a bid in the 5 minutes or so prior to the open. Seeing a bit of volume coming through as we run into the figure. It might be worth watching the Dow, because the Dow has been, oh God. Right, well, that's going to be tricky to move. That's a problem for another time. We are seeing the Dow push higher into the open. Always get some interesting action on the opens after data comes through from the Dow. So worth taking a look at, see if Goldman can get this really shifting higher or not. Seeing some decent action in the very start of the day. Seeing, where are we? Bit of life in there as we look back at the charts. Take a look at the S&P starting to soften off a tad. Not seeing quite so much life on the S&Ps as we did in the Dow in that first few seconds. Seeing a little bit uncertainty in the Nasdaq, so not too much going in there, but we're now starting to push that a little bit higher. And here comes that raw higher in the Dow. Maybe we'll have a look up towards that point of control. The value area highs around 85. Starting to get a bit of a motor on now, just nudging those highs that we had earlier on in the pre-market. So this is a bit of a level it needs to take out if it wants to continue on its trajectory. Hearing that Tesla shares are down a couple of percent as well this morning. If I look over to the Nasdaq components, we're seeing Tesla down 1.3. Apple not had the greatest start to the year. Apple has it. We've seen a little bit of a struggle since the end of last year. That kind of gap open into Tuesday, and now we're kind of rolling over another gap down from Friday last week to where we are today. We're not far off. We're in the kind of price zone of that low that we had for the year back on the 5th. So if this wants to roll over and sell off, that is going to be a drag on stocks, I would say. This is the biggest component of, or joint up there with Microsoft, really, of the Nasdaq and the S&P. So if Apple doesn't manage to claw itself back up. That's probably going to weigh across the board, you would suggest. Other than that, probably worth just focusing on the remainder of the week. We have bond auctions aplenty as we get through the remainder of the day. We've got a couple out in the US, 3 and 6 month bonds. But really, the big ones I think this week are going to be the 20-year in the US tomorrow and the 10-year tips. They're the big US ones tomorrow. We're expecting the US 10-year gilt auction out from 10 o'clock and a 30-year bond auction out from 10:30. So plenty potentially to get us going as we roll through the week. Right, I'll leave it with you there, and we'll be back with Neil tomorrow morning. Plenty more out this week. Take a look at those bond auctions, and the earnings really get going next week. So if you want to, find me on Twitter or whatever, or drop a message for me on the Educator Trades Telegram group, and I'll ping over a copy of the earnings calendar. This can be a pretty good way of keeping you out of trouble and getting you into some pretty good trades. As I say, the next couple of weeks, as we get through Travelers on Friday, as we run through the rest of this week. Next week, we've got loads and loads. So, this is the heart of the main course of the earnings season.